Okay, John.
Hey, welcome to Ask the Director. Hi everybody, my name is John Walczak and we're so thrilled that you're joining us today. We're broadcasting today from our Black-footed Ferret Conservation Center. In this building, this is a place that you don't usually get to see at the zoo. It's behind the scenes and it's our area where we breed the most endangered mammal in North America. Matter of fact, back in the 1980s, folks thought that the black-footed ferret was extinct. Until one day, in the town of Meeteetse, Wyoming, a border collie named Shep brought a dead black-footed ferret to its rancher, and that caused the study to find out, were there more black-footed ferrets, and what can we do to save them? Well, they found a colony of, well, you know what, at this point, what I'm going to do is I want to introduce you to somebody. The ferrets are right through this window, so welcome to all the black-footed ferrets. You'll see them bopping around, coming up and down. They live in these enclosures, which allows us to take great care of them and also breed them. And then I want to introduce you to Mr. Guy Graves. Guy has been with the zoo for what, 36 years, Guy? 30?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And he's been taking care of these black-footed ferrets since 1990, I believe?
Yeah, 1991, January 1991 is actually when they arrived.
Oh, and so Guy, anything you want to know about black-footed ferrets, he's the guy. So Guy, thank you for joining us and really appreciate the great work that Guy does. He's also the Species Survival Plan Co-Coordinator. So Guy, back in the day, was it when they first found it, was it 18 animals but only 11 were found or something?
What ended up happening is, as you mentioned, the rancher's dog Shep brought the carcass back, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service came out and they looked around and they found about 120 to 130 ferrets at that time. They decided they were going to study them and see what happened. And then in 1985, they noticed that the population was crashing. And they decided that in order to save them, they were going to have to get them out of the wild. They were able to get 18 animals out of the wild, and that was the core population for all of the breeding group that's come since then. Between ourselves and the 4 other zoos and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service site out in Carr, Colorado, we've produced over 11,000 kits over the years just from that core group. You know, we talk a lot about social distancing and about quarantining and such and disease prevention. You know, we've been doing that since day one here. You know, these guys are like little AIDS patients.
Yeah, you're used to wearing a mask.
I've worn a mask every day that I've been in this building. You know, since I started back in 1991. So
well, I think we got a question for you.
Well, actually, I'm going to see if I can move in there a little bit. If we could do our social distance dance, and I move in and get a little bit.
Oh, that's fine. So, and by the way, folks, we actually measured this room, and we're at least 6 feet apart. Plus, we're wearing our masks. But like Guy was saying,
okay, so I'll trade some. Guy, can I trade you places?
yes, you certainly.
All right, I'll trade.
Guy was mentioning that that when he goes into that room, he's always wearing a mask. Matter of fact, this building was designed for biocontainment, I think level 3 of what CDC requires. Everybody knows what CDC is today. They might not have 35 years ago when we built this.
Yes, when we first started, I actually had to take a shower and wash my hair every single time I came into the building before I went into the, with the ferrets. And so, you know, either I got very organized or I got very clean because I couldn't leave the building.
Makes you think about what you want to do at lunch hour.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. You bring your lunch a lot.
Other than that, or you invest in a skin lotion company.
Right.
You're going to be drying up.
Indeed, indeed.
All right, we do have a question, Kyle.
We do have a question. Robbie Gilbert would like to know, is there a concern of pet ferrets crossbreeding somehow with this wild endangered population?
Guy, we'll turn that to you.
Well, you know what? These guys, well number one, there really aren't, there's not much of a risk as far as them crossbreeding because there really aren't that many ferrets out there, unfortunately. It would be very unlikely you would ever see one in their native habitat, even though they have been released since the late 80s. These guys are a bit different than the domestics. The domestics have some of the same issues, but these guys are little, like I said, they're little AIDS patients. They are very inbred. The last population was you know, there was not a lot of genetic variation.
That's something that we're learning about too, because it's, usually, the guy just mentioned genetic variation, and starting with 11 animals is not indicative, that's not the genetic health you'd want to start a colony, but so far you mentioned 11,000 have been
Correct, yeah, and then there's actually a computer program that's run so we can minimize as much as possible the inbreeding. But yeah, there's really not the opportunity, unless there was some population that we don't know about, you know, where we could bring in other animals. There's really not a chance of, you know, increasing that much from where we started.
It seems like it's going to be a real interesting long-term study for the theories on adaptive radiation, and that, you know, what we don't know about genetics and how these animals may be able to manifest in that regard.
Yes, as I've always said, the black-footed ferret is a good case study for why you want to plan in environmental impact early, because it's a lot easier. You know, people may complain about, you know, environmental assessments. It's a lot easier to do that at the beginning than trying to put them back. You know, with the ferret or the condor, you know, it's very difficult to get them reestablished once they get down to a handful of animals.
Yeah, for so many of our species survival plans, you want to have 100 animals or more.
Correct.
To provide that genetic diversity. So when you're starting with 11, you got to make sure you're paying attention to that mean kinship, and hopefully the genetic recessives don't manifest in too many challenges.
Right, and then there's always a, yes?
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I know,
Guy's very polite. He'll always.
Thank you, Guy. 8-year-old Braxton would like to know what ferret prey is. He also wanted to tell you the birds in our backyard hatched, because if we recall, a couple of weeks ago we were talking about that.
Congratulations to Braxton and the birds.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
yeah, the ferrets actually feed on prairie dogs, and so they live out west in areas where there's prairie dogs. And if you were to go out west, you'd swear there's billions of prairie dogs, but there's actually only about 1% of what there used to be, because the West has been developed, you know, just like everywhere else for ranching and development. So when we reintroduce the ferrets back out into their native habitat, which is the goal of this building, we have to go to areas where there's, you know, active prairie dog colonies. One of the big challenges to that is that in addition to being poisoned, you know, or the prairie dogs have been poisoned in the past, there's disease issues like plague out there, which can just totally decimate prairie dog colonies. So when we go out, that's one of our big keys, is we have to find areas where there's no active plague in the area.
And Braxton, Braxton, you asked a great question. Matter of fact, your last questions are great. We could talk about that for the whole time. But as Guy mentioned, the prairie dogs, it's the only food source, the key food source. Mm-hmm. And what happened, and this is why we call this our conservation center, is that ranchers thought that the prairie dogs were destructive to their cattle industry. You know, cow might step in a hole, or they might compete for grasslands, which it does happen to a minute extent, but not at all to a threat to the cattle industry. So, regrettably, there was a period of time where they would, if they had a prairie dog colony, they would eliminate it through poisoning or dumping gas down the burrows or other means, which were tragic environmentally. But you know, it's wonderful now. Guys mentioned the wild, and I always talk about it as the remnant wild, because there's only 1% of the prairie dogs left, right, Guy? 1%.
Correct.
So there's not these vast open spots, but what's really cool is that ranchers now are teaming up with U.S. Fish and Wildlife biologists and people like Guy, and actually Kyle, Guy, and I were on a ranch about 6 years ago and worked with a rancher who was excited about getting these black-footed ferrets released back onto their ranch. That was really a cool experience. If I remember, there was 2 sisters that owned the ranch. One was so excited about the conservation potential. She was like, oh my gosh, I'm helping an endangered species. And the other sister, do you remember what she asked?
Yes, she said, well, let's take care of the prairie dogs.
She wanted to know how many prairie dogs
they would eat. Yeah, that's exactly, and it's about split half and half, you know.
Yeah, Kyle.
Cole, who's 6, who is a good avid watcher, we've seen his name a lot, wants to know how old a lot of these guys are and how long they live.
Well, in captivity, they will live up to 8 or 9 years. In the wild, or in the remnant wild, when they're released, they only usually live to be maybe 2 or 3. because these guys are nowhere near the top of the food chain. They themselves are prey for a lot of other animals, coyotes, badgers, birds of prey, which is why it's a bit of a challenge to get these guys reestablished into their native habitat, because the females will just have 1 litter a year. And she can have anywhere from 1 to 8, usually about 3 or 4 is average. So it's a bit of a challenge to get the numbers up from year to year.
And yeah, the other part of that, that's a great question again, is, and as Guy mentioned, certainly these animals are in a captive situation, but you'll often hear me say that all animals today live in managed systems. And the ferret is a perfect example of that, because even though when we take them and they'll go out to the west and they'll live in a reintroduction scenario, so they learn how to hunt and fend for themselves, but even when we release them onto a ranch, guess what? They're still being managed. There's population biologists studying them. They're trying to control the population. They're watching to see if a disease outbreak occurs. So throughout the world today, there truly is no wild as what you might picture it in your mind. All the animals on this planet are being studied, and all the wild places on this planet are being limited, so we have to study them to see if we can get them to survive.
I have a follow-up question to that, is when we do release them into the wild, are they microchipped, and how do we keep track of the ones we've released?
Yes, they do. They actually, before they go out, they are processed. They get a transponder chip that has an identifying number on it, just like a dog or a cat would have. And so what they do is we'll put them out, and then the states, the game and fish departments, usually in the winter, will go out with high-powered lights on their truck, and they'll shine it across the prairie. And if they see an animal with a bright emerald green eye shine, they will know it's black-footed ferret, and they'll go out to the hole, and they've got a transponder reader that they can put over the hole, so when the ferret sticks its head up, they can get a readout and identify that ferret.
So,
hey Kyle, I'm sorry, I need to do a commercial break.
Yes.
I failed when we opened today to thank Ford Motor Company and T-Mobile for sponsoring our spring and summer. Thank them both so much, because we're not open, and that's usually what really is wonderful for a sponsor, but they are continuing their funding even though we are closed. So thank you, Ford. Thank you, T-Mobile. Also want to give a shout out to the Highlands Papa John's, who's been feeding us 2 days a week, and they are so generous. And Guy likes that pizza. Guy gave us an amen if you couldn't hear that. So thank you for allowing me the commercial.
Absolutely. So 3-year-old Lexi wants to know who, we're looking at this first guy in the second row here, what his name is?
His name is Noggins.
Noggins. Okay.
Yeah, he has, he's sired many kids over the years.
And now, who came up with that name?
You know what? I think he came in with
came
that name.
in.
Yeah, what ends up happening is, go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, no.
What ends up happening is the kids that end up going out for release, usually about 80% or more of the kids that are born each year in the spring, will go out as reintroduction animals. The ones that stay back to replace our older animals, then we go ahead and name them. And we normally try to name them something that reminds us of their lineage, you know. So, for example, we had a female that was 50 Cent, and so we came up with monetary theme for the kids. So
It wasn't a rapper.
No, it wasn't a rapper.
Okay, all right.
That John knew that is awesome.
Yeah, really, that's more significant.
I have a good question, and we mentioned this earlier, but can we talk about how many are left in the remnant wild, and how long do they live in a managed system?
You got the guy to tell you, because this is...
Yeah, as far as when we release them, usually about 2 years is about what we would expect them to survive.
Wild's a tough place, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's very difficult, because the prairie dog that they're feeding on is quite a bit bigger than they are. And they have to kill one about every 3 days in order to survive. You know, and sometimes they themselves are killed by the prairie dogs when they're trying to eat. And then, as I mentioned, they're also preyed upon by a lot of other animals. So they definitely will survive a lot longer in this building than they ever will, you know, when they're put out into their native habitat. That's for sure.
I always think it's fun. This is not a question. This is my question, that you can talk about the boot camp that they go to sometimes.
Yes, before they actually go out and they're released into the different sites, we take them out to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Black-footed Ferret Conservation Center in Carr, Colorado. It's similar to this in construction, but it's about 4 times as big. So they've got about 1/2 of the 250 ferrets that are in captivity at that location. And in addition to that, outside they've got 40 pens, 20 by 20 pens that have prairie dogs in them. So the kits, before they actually go out to be released, will be put into the pens to make sure they're able to hunt before they move on.
Boot camp.
Exactly.
Hopefully, Catherine, you just asked that question right as I was asking it as well, so hopefully that answered yours. Robbie wants to know how many we release in a season and how successful is the breeding program and what is the measure of success?
I have to do a shout out for Guy, because Guy, am I correct in saying that we're the most successful zoo in the world with black-footed ferrets?
Well, of the
don't be humble. You do a great job.
Yeah, we have produced over 1,100, and usually we'll average 2 dozen to 3 dozen kits in the course of a year, and and then we've released 688 over the years.
So more than half have been released.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, a lot of them will stay back because the ferrets that are here, a lot of, as they get older, they'll go out as exhibit animals, like Buddha down in our MetaZoo. If you come out and visit, or when you can come out and visit, you can see Buddha down in our MetaZoo. He was up here for several years before he went down there.
We keep seeing Noggin jump down and disappear. Where's he going?
Well, the cage is basically set up in a rough sense to simulate their native environment, in that we've got the little box down there. It's got bedding in it. And then it's connected to the top of the cage by a black tube. So it basically gives the ferrets the impression that they're going above ground and below ground, just like they would, if they were out on the prairie. And now in their native state out west, they're nocturnal. So they wouldn't be up now, but they know that I'm about to feed them. So when I feed them, they'll grab their food and they'll take it down, what's called caching, or storing. They'll take it down to their nest box, and they'll keep it down there, and then they'll basically go to sleep until lights go out and the sun goes down. And
so what we're seeing now, Guy, it's a lot like the dog barking at the back door.
Correct. Exactly. That's exactly what.
So if you see a ferret keep looking at Guy and doing a behavior like Noggin, a lot of that is, we call that anticipatory behavior, because they're saying, Guy, where's my food? And
exactly.
My dog will bark about 45 minutes before dinner time, and she's unrealistic.
Just to remind you.
Yes, yes.
That's a good segue to this question. A lot of people have been commenting about, it would be fun to have them as a pet, but they're not really pets.
No, as a matter of fact, if you were to get a close-up of my hands, you would see that I've got a lot of scars, because these guys will try to bite me even when I'm feeding them. I have to be very careful. You talk about social distancing. I open up their cage, and I'm a good 6 foot back when I'm frisbeeing their food into the cage for them, because they'll grab my hand if I get too close.
Well, that's the difference between wild and domesticated. The European polecat that people have as pets, what happens is, years ago, someone will find one of those animals that kind of gets along okay with humans. It's how the dog was domesticated from the wolf. You keep breeding and breeding and breeding for that trait. But these, we're trying to keep them as wild as possible, right? So
correct.
When we release them back into the remnant wild, they got a fighting chance.
Exactly. And yeah, they have their instincts. I mean, when they're introduced to prairie dogs, they know exactly what they're supposed to do. But I mean, they'll go right after me like I was a coyote.
Oh, new nickname for Guy.
Yeah, there you go.
El Coyote.
I don't know. His radio is already weasel wide.
There you go.
JC has a question about what the difference between a male and a male and a female black-footed ferret is.
Well, basically, it's interesting. It's basically very similar to any other species, as far as the physical makeup of the male and female. But one thing that's interesting about these guys is when the kids are born, I have to figure out fairly quickly what sex they are, so our stud bookkeeper can go ahead and tally that information so we can figure out who's going to go out for a lease. And you really can't tell the difference until about 21 days on these guys.
And with them, and ferrets are tricky, and we're not going into a lot of detail. There's a lot of that involved from, let's just say, where number 1 comes from and where number 2 comes from.
That's exactly it.
That's
yes.
right. We're not getting into the details.
Yes.
We could happy to discuss that one-on-one, but that's what you measure to tell the difference.
But it is not easy when the kids are born to tell the difference. It's very difficult.
Well, I can imagine. That's a handful to try and measure while it's trying to bite you.
Yeah, exactly.
So what would a couple of differences between a domestic ferret, which we know as our pets, and these guys?
Well, I tell you what, a lot of the different, they can have some of the same disease problems. These guys can get some of the same cancers that the domestic ferrets can. But one big difference is the domestic ferrets, if you have more than one of them at home, for example, you can just put them together in the same cage. They'll sleep together, play together. These guys are solitary animals. If I were to put 2 of them into a cage together, with the exception of the breeding season, when their hormones have changed, they would try to kill each other. So that's why we've got 1 ferret per cage there. So I have to be real careful when I am determining, if they're ready to be paired or not, because if I'm wrong, then I'm going to have to separate them really quickly.
That's so important, and something that it's really imperative to know about wild animals is that procreating, making babies is a huge drive in the animal kingdom, from some invertebrates up to, I know with polar bears, when a male polar bear is trying to make a girlfriend, he will not eat for 3-4 weeks, and the whole time he's trying to make friends with her while fighting off other males. So that territoriality, it's because they want to make sure their babies are the future. And that's why they work so hard towards it.
Exactly.
Hey, Guy, I'm going to pop up a shot of this chart. Can you tell us what this is?
Yeah, basically that's the dam. I've got the different headings there. I've got the dam. That is the female. That's the mom. The sire is the male. I've got a whelp date. That's the date that I'm expecting the kids to be born. The gestation for these guys is just 42 days. So as opposed to 9 months for a human. So it's very short. So and then also I've got born and then the number of live. But we have not had any litters yet. Our first litter is actually due today. Boop is due today.
Boop.
Boop.
That's a great name.
Guy, as we've been doing some of these, and certainly we do Fitz Fridays, we talk about how the keepers, slept in the barn for 5-6 months to take care of the elephants, and just how incredibly lucky we are to work with such a wonderful, dedicated, giving people that are willing to help each other out and share their knowledge. So, if you don't mind, I'm going to tell folks a little bit about Guy, and then we've been asked many times.
Sure.
Do you want to
come over here, Guy, and I'll show you.
All right, we can make a turn
we'll
around.
Do our dance.
Okay, sure.
Do our dance again.
Guy, as we said, he's been at the zoo over 36 years, and I love his background. And all of our dedicated folks here have incredible backgrounds. Most of them have done some volunteering along the way, which you started off as a...
Yeah, I started out, I've tried to figure this out over the years. The best I can figure is that it was either 1975, 1976. It was before I was driving. I was volunteering out here. I had never worked anywhere else in my life. I started out as a teenager, carrying tickets and driving the train, and then I went to Purdue. Got a degree in animal science.
I'm Penn State. But
I know.
That Big Ten rivalry goes.
Exactly. But then I came back and was able to get a job starting in our old aquatics area with our polar bears at the time and some other species. And then moved to the elephants, where I was for 7 years before I came here.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, didn't you do some work or accomplish your MBA too?
Yeah, I also have an MBA, yes.
All right, so this is such an amazing, you are so, all of our folks here are so wonderful and dedicated, but folks, here's Guy, all that education, he's got his MBA, he could be in the private sector making really good money, and our staff here, we don't starve, but they're not getting rich. And that just, I think you're a wonderful example of the dedication and the intellect, and the character, the character to choose the value of saving one of the world's most endangered species, as opposed to pursuing some financial rewards, and I really want to commend you for that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, every keeper out here, not just me, we would do this for free because basically we all have at one time or another.
That's right.
But yes, it's nice to eventually get paid. But yeah, I mean, this is a job where everybody really enjoys coming to work. I mean, you really do, because you never know, what you're going to get to witness. I get to see these guys and see the kits, and then see the kits be released, and that's really, why people get into this type of works, when you can put them back out into their native habitats.
Incredibly rewarding. And can't thank you enough, Guy.
Well, thank you guys for coming by.
It's you are a conservation hero. You're saving North America's most endangered mammal. Folks, you're helping us with that every time you come to the zoo. As a member, $1 from every membership goes to support our conservation programs, and not just in North America, but elephants in Africa and orangutan in Indonesia. So thanks to our members, thanks to our guests who are also part of that are coming, just buying one ticket at a time. Really appreciate you. And I really want to commend all of our staff, because they are essential. They're working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and they are doing a wonderful job. They're all healthy, thank goodness. The animals are all healthy. We've not had any COVID infections. So thank you. And also, I want to thank you all for watching, coming in and tuning in, and we can't wait to see you in person. We are, of course, working on our reopening plan, and when it's time to go, we'll be ready to go, and can't wait to see you back out here. I want to give a shout out again to T-Mobile, the Ford Motor Company. Thank you so much for sponsoring us. Highlands Papa John's. God, you love that pizza?
There we go.
All right. I know you've been known to eat a few pizzas.
Yeah, I've eaten a few pizzas.
Yeah, I'm known for that. And even to go home and order another one out.
Oh, there you go.
I've done that
there
before.
You go.
And folks, we want to thank you. Stay well, stay safe. Remember that social distancing. As the world reopens, this is a critical time. Probably, maybe the most critical, because we're going to be interacting with each other more. You see Guy and I 6 feet apart, wearing masks. Wash your hands, take your temperature. Our employees take their temperature every day before they come to work. So it's a critical time. We want the best for you. We hope that we get to see you soon. So stay well, stay safe. Remember that 6 feet. And until, next Monday, Kyle, we do this again?
Next Monday.
All right. There's programs every day of the week. And let's see, the only time it's not at 2 is 11 o'clock on Thursdays. So tune into our Facebook streaming. Until then, thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great week.